Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Rick.
How are you, bud?
Good, man. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. How's business ownership going? Brick and mortar.
Nothing to it.
Don't you love
It's
it?
a piece of cake.
First thing that happened today, you guys, when I came in, is I went in the men's restroom and there was the cleaning crew left a mop bucket in there. So I'm like, hey, Matt, there's a mop bucket in the guy's bathroom. And he's like, oh.
You still, own some of the gym. You could have moved that.
I know, I could have, but I'd much rather make you feel bad about it. Leadership 101.
It was a learning moment, I think he tried to use it. I think he put the bucket in there, actually.
I did. I slid it in there. I'm like, who's going to notice? It's a tripwire, like David Lee Roth's different colored M&Ms, right?
I told you, man. I had a coach that did stuff like that, yeah.
I know.
Lay out a candy wrapper on a baseball field and see how long it takes till somebody picked it up.
If you didn't, everybody ran?
No, it never got picked up. We ran our butts off.
That seems really passive aggressive. That's one thing. If like we talk about David Lee Roth and his tripwire, like only this color M&Ms in the bowl, and it's like or leave out this color or whatever, and everyone's like, oh, what a diva. But they were doing these like pyrotechnics, crazy shows, so he didn't want to catch on fire. I mean, it happened to Michael Jackson on that Pepsi commercial. It was that same era, he didn't want to catch on fire. So he's like, man, if they can't get the M&Ms right, I don't want this crew working for me. So I understand why he did it. For us, not so much. And I could have moved the mop bucket, but the room's full of people, which is a good thing. So that's part of your work as well, is growing the gym. So I couldn't roll the mop bucket through that mess of people out there to get it to the back, or else I would have.
It's okay, I got it.
But I would have given you the stink eye while I was rolling it across the room anyway.
Definitely. I get those all the time.
What is this? The operating partner rolls the mop bucket. I just complain about it. Come on, that's the way this works. I'm an investor now. I don't have to do this shit. Anyway, welcome everyone to the Alloy Personal Training Business Podcast, where today we talk about the subject of
trainer pay.
Trainer pay. It's a big deal. So this subject was actually inspired by over the weekend on a forum. Somebody tagged me on a Facebook forum, private forum, and someone was asking about payroll. And so it made me think that, this might be an interesting topic to talk about. So the question was, they run a one-on-one training business.
Yep.
And they have one trainer now, so brand new, just opened. And currently they're paying that trainer 60% of the billable hours that they work. So
damn.
Exactly. It's like, well, you hate to flame someone and you don't know till you know. And to be honest, I was there. Like when we had a 1099 subcontractors, I paid 60%, right? Now, if they're employed, which you have to almost in any scenario legally these days, 60% is not just 60%. If you're offering any kind of benefits, you've got payroll taxes, it's more than that.
Right.
So it's more than 60%. And I will tell you, that does not leave you enough margin on the back end. You would have to do such high volume to make that formula work.
Sure.
And it's just not going to work. So my answer was, and the formula that we should stick to, and this is the magic number, is that you don't pay out more than 20% of the billable revenue to the individuals servicing that revenue. So if you look, that's where we'll start, right?
Right.
20%. Golden rule. So if you look at this guy's business model, and it was very similar to what we used to run, so I understood it immediately. It's like I charge $40 for half an hour. Mm-hmm. Trainers get 60%. So if they're working for an hour, that would be $50 an hour or something like that. It's like, okay, that's pretty good. Too good, actually. Now, following the golden rule of 20%, that would mean $8 a session or $16 an hour, to which I would anticipate he would respond, I'm not going to be able to attract any good talent for $16 an hour and, for high-level coaches. And I would probably agree with that. I would say, yes, you're right. And so then it begs the question, how in the world, if you're running that business model, do you get to 20% where you can actually make money, right? Because 20% is just the expense of servicing the revenue to the coaches, to the trainers, if you will. Then you might have a manager, right? And that's different. That's extra salary. You've got your bills, you've got your rent, you've got your electricity, you've got marketing expense. There's a lot of other expenses that all, add up to then have your monthly expenses, so that you then show EBITDA, which is the gap, right? It's your profit. So this isn't like all of the expenses in your business, by the way. That's why it needs to be low, because you have other expenses. Like especially if you're new and you're growing, you're going to have a bigger marketing allocation than you normally would. So 20% is the rule. So you look at this, it's like, okay, that would mean my coaches would make $16 an hour. My answer to that, because I don't have an answer to the one-on-one model. I don't. Like you could drive high volume, You could run a tiered system where you pay people based on how much they make more. But at the end of the day, it's an expensive model. How do I know? I ran it for 10 years,
Sure.
right? There's a lot of activity, a lot of people coming and going, a coach for every person that ever shows up in the gym, and the margins are not great. So you have to do high volume, right?
Or
So
charge more.
yeah. Well, it's still, but if you're paying as a percentage, like you're charging more, but you're still paying out a percentage. It's like, it just doesn't add up. The difficulty in raising rates, it really better pay off. So in other words, like the reason to raise your rates is so that all of that money can go towards the bottom line and maybe create more overall payroll. But if you're just going to run a percentage, raising your rates isn't going to move the needle for you much at all.
Yeah, well, if you're trying to get to that 20% and make it more appealing.
Right. Exactly. I mean, but in a one-on-one setting, what would you have to charge if you want to pay your coaches that much? It would be $200 an hour to get to 25% even, right?
Yeah,
it's like, it's not going to happen. So my answer was change your business model. And I mean, this is another good reason, another compelling reason to do what we do at the Alloway, personal training franchise, which is to go to small group training. Why? Well, let's do the math. So at our 12-time a month membership, we're just a hair lower than $30 a session, right? Which is great. We're giving them a session that would be the equivalent, if it was one-on-one, of $80 an hour in our market, similar to this guy who was asking the question, right? So, okay, $30 an hour versus $80. So it's easy to sell. We do unit pricing when we sell it. You sell them in. If our session is full, and we're just going to use full because there is a tiered trainer pay that goes along with how many people are in the session. If our session is full, we run 6-to-1 ratio, max of 6. That would be $180 an hour for easy math, right?
Yep.
So we could afford to pay out 20% of that, which is $36 an hour. And that would be if the session was full and that person was earning full pay, and we were around 20%. Now we run here like $34 an hour.
Yep.
At $34 an hour, if someone's working, and we put coaches on shifts, right? So it's not just get paid for what you service. You're here on a shift, and we'll talk about how do the placeholder fee. But that's still $70,000 a year. I guarantee you that's more than most of the one-on-one trainers are making when they dip in and out. They come in for a couple people in the morning, come back in the middle of the day, come back, do 2 or 3 at night. There's very few personal trainers out there making a steady $70,000 a year.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
And not only are they making that much money, but the club is still keeping its percentage less than 20%, which means that there's perks, right? Because that's less than 20%. So that means we can now afford to offer benefits, tax-deferred retirement, health benefit, paid time off, like a real career, something you could stick with forever, right? Which is why our retention of coaches is so long. None of that works, though, in a one-on-one training model. It just doesn't. So it's like there's ways to do it, but it's going to be a lot of activity for not as much margin. So I would highly encourage people, and why we do it. You go to small group, it makes it less expensive for the customer, right? And it makes it easier to pay coaches well, right? But still keep your margins healthy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So then people would say, well, that's just trainer pay. Like, what's overall? So here's the great thing about, we have 2 models, as you know, Matt, but to our audience, we have Stronger One, which is one pod, if you will, which is one coach in the gym at any given time training up to 6 people, right?
Yep.
That model keeps the overall payroll, not just the pay to the coaches, but the overall payroll for that entire model is less than 20%. That's pretty compelling.
Wow.
So if you're doing, say, $460, $480 a year in revenue, right? You're less than 20% for the entire staff to service that revenue.
Wow.
That's pretty good. Yeah, and then we have a rent factor of threshold of 15%. Well, you're normally going to be able to stay well below that as well, right? So if you're talking about rent factor less than 15%, payroll less than 20%, it's the possibility, because you have to say this because our lawyers will have a heart attack, but the margins in that business can be really, really compelling. Low barrier of entry, really good margins on the back end, right? Especially if you want to sit in one of those seats as the owner. If you want to be the manager, some of that payroll expense is going into your pocket, right? You have a job, granted, but that's not a bad job to have. And then you're realizing the manager / coach salary in addition to the profit margins or profit distributions. So what would you do then if you had a bigger entity? So if you look at like Stronger 2, now you're going to incur the expense of maybe an admin and certainly a manager. And the manager can service some revenue, but when you're in a bigger model, even with a low churn rate, it just takes more time to take care of the flock, so do those accountability sessions, and to sell, right? So if you're turning out, 3%, you're sitting on 250 clients, you're churning out 7 people a month, something like that. That's not a ton of people, but if you're trying to grow a net 15 a month, it takes a lot of sales activity to get that 20 to 30 customers at the price threshold that we're talking about.
Yep.
Right? So you have to have a dedicated manager. That brings the overall payroll cost, a little bit higher. If you can keep the overall payroll cost around 30%, 35 upper end, 30 ideally, that's really good. So for any of you guys who are running any other kind of a model, 30% would be the golden rule. Now, if you're running Stronger One, it's like, hell yeah, you're less than 20%. So that's why that's so compelling, right? So, any questions about that?
No, I mean, I'm interested in hear how the incentive pay and all that works with the
coaches.
Trainers.
Yeah. So the way that we break that down, you guys, is we do like shifts, because I feel like if you want to help a coach build a customer base and you want to have a product on the shelf, no different than a grocery store that's going to sell flour and sugar. It's like, well, you got to have it in stock because people are going to go to the shelf and grab it and want to buy it, right? And in so many ways, the people here are the product, right? Like they're delivering the service for you, so it's the flour or the sugar. So got to have it on the shelf. So we do that by having a placeholder fee for training. So we use $10 an hour, right?
Yep.
So you're going to have $10 an hour. Let's say you're working 6 to noon. This would be a full-time shift, right? I'm actually coming in at 5:30 because we've got pre-opening responsibilities, and I'm working to 12:30. So it's a 7-hour shift, 6 hours of actual training. So I'm making my $10 an hour guaranteed from 5:30 to 7:30. Now, in my 6 to 12, when I'm training people, I'm going to get a per head or per paying client, bump, if you will, bonus towards my pay. So in our case, it would be $4 per active client in your session. So if I'm at a placeholder of 10, then I'm going to add to that $4 for everyone that shows up. Then if I have 6 people, that's 24. That's where we got 34. $24, 6 times 4,
right,
plus the 10 gives me that $34 an hour.
So that's a straight up incentive to keep your schedule full, basically.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is in the past we have gone to, when we're fully booked all the time, it's like, well, let's just pay a flat salary, right? Well, we took a bit of a haircut during COVID, and it was like, oh, no one is feeling any pain except for the business, right?
Yeah.
And so we could do overall pay cuts, but it's like most of the people here, they have kids and they're living a certain lifestyle, couldn't do it. I mean, we ended up having to let somebody go, because of that. And it was probably the responsible thing to do. Again, everyone used this opportunity last year to really, tighten the purse strings a bit and look at some extraneous expenses. And, again, it was just one of those things that probably needed to happen,
right,
either way around. But it also allowed us to go to performance-based pay. Now, why do you do that? We've talked about this on previous podcasts. It's like what gets measured gets managed.
Yep.
So having someone being paid based on how many people are in their session just changes the lens on things a little bit, right? Like if you're working on a Saturday, you might be more apt to hop on Friday afternoon on the private Facebook page for the gym and be like, hey guys, I'm training tomorrow. Let's get the schedule full, bring some friends, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like it just helps overall. Whereas if not, it's not like you're a terrorist to the company, but you just don't think the same. It's like, well, I'm going to get paid the same tomorrow either way.
So we've been doing this for, I don't know how long it's, maybe been 6 months or so. We've been doing the incentive-based pay. And this is the first time, and I've been here in 10 years, we actually trained somebody on a Sunday.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's like, we're not like technically open Sundays, but what do I care? We're not here anyway.
Right.
Somebody wants to come in and train Sundays.
It's incentivized the coach to actually want to go get people in front of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's not a bad thing, right? As long as it's kept within the structure of like teamwork and, it's not toxic like the one-on-one training environments in the big gyms where you're trying to
don't touch my people.
Yeah, exactly. Go out of town, tell your people not to work with other people. It doesn't work that way. There's an abundance mindset for sure. And as the water rises, the ships rise kind of idea. But yeah, 100%. So $10 an hour place fee, $4 a head. Software, most every software can track that. It sounds like it might be a little bit complicated to keep up with, but it's not.
Okay.
It's not. It's very easy to keep track of that over time.
I had some questions recently about paying for like meetings and things like that. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's what that placeholder rate is for.
Right.
So if you think about the $10 an hour, right, that would be the pay that you would use for that.
So if you have a team meeting, you pay them the same base holder.
Gotcha. Correct. And that also covers the front and the back end of the shift, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like it covers the get here at 5:30, work till 12:30 idea, because that's it's $5 on either end, but it's still like you've got them on a shift, they're being paid.
Right.
And we're kind of looking at the bigger picture. That's why we like shifts, right?
Yeah. I actually had somebody tell me that they couldn't afford to pay people for meetings.
Well, then you can't have meetings, but meetings are kind of important.
Right. I was like, well, that's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, again, it's like, so most gym owners, and this is what we've seen just overall, you've got a lot of activity. A lot of people brag around top line revenue. Even like here, like, oh, we did $1 million when we were doing one-on-one. Well, our margins weren't that great back then because we were paying out 60% or something ridiculous, right? So yeah, we had a ton of activity and we had $1 million a year gross business, but our actual margins on that weren't that great, probably in that 12% range, right? And that's what we see with a lot of gyms. The problem with that is you just have no wiggle room at all like that. Like, okay, so we come in and say, okay, we're going to systemize things. You guys need to start having weekly meetings. And here's the way to structure the meetings. And here's why they're important. Brings everybody together and blah, 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 right? And then we get the feedback like, oh, I can't afford to pay people for meetings. It's like, well, that means you need to go all the way back to fixing your business so that there is margin in there so you can even do things to improve and grow your business. Like, how do you spend more on marketing if you have no margin?
Right.
And why would you want to pile more expense and chaos onto a broken business model as it is, right? So I was pleased to hear, to go back to the question in the forum that this person had just opened, and he recognized that he was overpaying the one coach, was getting ready to hire a few more. I didn't want to repeat that. And I'm sure he didn't want to hear from me like, well, you got to change your business model. But it was a better time than getting down the road when you're doing $1 million in revenue and then having to change it. I went through that, right?
Yeah, that's probably a big pain in the butt. What do you do? Like, we have a dedicated salesperson in that Stronger 2 model. What do you do? Like, if there's facilities that are actually, the coaches are doing sales, and like, how do you manage that?
You have to pay them. There's already been precedent set and that usually happens sort of in the bigger club setting, right? Like, if you look at, I think it was Gold's Gym, Texas, right? There was a class action. There was a lawsuit against them, and it was from multiple trainers. And the lawsuit was because they had been required to do what they call fitness consultations. We call them starting point sessions. It's basically a sales opportunity and a chance to get to know a client, talk about goals, things like that. They were required to do those at no pay.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, and the Gold's Gym defense was like, well, we're putting someone in front of you. It's your opportunity to close the deal, but they weren't being paid to do so. And so it ended up the case, was won by the coaches against the Gold's Gym organization for making them work for free. Right. So it wasn't a true sales position, and it had to do with the percentage of hours that they spent actually personal training versus the percentage of hours that they spent selling. Right. And it was always more heavily weighted into servicing revenue than trying to sell revenue. Right. So it's just one of those things, and now precedence has been set, so you just can't do it. So you're going to have to pay people. Again, the placeholder fee works really well for that, right? It's like, all right, well, you're going to get $10 an hour. I know you probably don't want to make 10. I really don't want to pay you 10 for nothing. So we're both going to work hard for you to either sell or train clients or whatever that is. And that's what I like, is like everyone's got the same target and the same objective.
Yeah, keep everybody aligned. Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the general rules, you guys. I hope that helps. 20% to trainers, servicing revenue. If it doesn't work, you're going to have to change your business model, but I would highly encourage you to do so. That's why we do small group personal training. It works that way. Total revenue, if you're on a larger model that needs a full-time sales and retention, strategist, or what we call director of training, 30% would be ideal. You can go up to 35. And yeah, I hope that helps. I'm sorry for the guys that aren't running those margins right now, but you're probably just overpaying or at some threshold, your fixed expenses, are the same. And so you're just not driving enough revenue. There's a couple of different levers that you can pull here that we could cover. But at the end of the day, that's the rule. And I hope that helps folks.
Cool. Awesome stuff. Thank you.
Thanks.